Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Friday, September 14th, 2018. Kevin Laramee, that's me. Duane Rollins, that's him, on the line. Good morning, Duane.
Good morning. That is, in fact, me, for sure. I'm almost certain of it.
Almost certain, exactly. That's good. That's good. You have to know who you are in life, you know. Speaking of knowing, this weekend, Major League Soccer is back. The international break is back. And Duane, before we start looking at the weekend preview, there's something that irked me yesterday on, you'll see, FC Dallas is playing against the Columbus Crew in Dallas.
Yes.
And people from Austin, the first Austin supporters group, are traveling to the game to get a glimpse of the players they'll have to watch next year. This is wrong. This is just wrong. It's still the Crew. It's still Columbus. F off, Austin.
Yeah, there's rules or something that have been floating around the Austin supporters. People are like sending this message out to the people that are going to Dallas to say, oh, here are the rules that we want you to follow. We don't want you to wear an Austin shirt. We don't, you know, if you have a scarf, that's your choice, but don't wave it. Don't be obvious. We don't want the cameras to pan to us with like Austin for MLS in the crowd. If you meet a Columbus fan, be respectful of them. If you meet a Columbus fan, duck, because that's honestly what you might want to do. And
run.
I have been very vocal about this, and we've been very, like, our opinions are in sync here. This is just ridiculous that they're going to move this team to a market that isn't. It's ridiculous to move any team. This is particularly ridiculous because it's Austin, Texas, which makes no sense. I hope this blows up in their face. I truly do, because although the fact that the later we get, like, at what point are they going to make the day that the Crew are eliminated? Will it be the next day? It might be.
You know, I have this image of my head. Last game in Columbus, it's food night. Everyone's getting food. And everyone's like, why are we being served Tex-Mex food? And then on the wrappers, they'll be saying Austin FC Crew. Like the Albuquerque Isotopes, the famous Simpsons joke. That's what it feels like.
It's so bad. If they really want to be in Austin, then they should give Columbus an expansion team at the very least. The San Jose solution, as I've been calling it, as other people have called it as well, in terms of they moved to the market, because this is ridiculous. How Precourt, do you really want to be in bed with this guy? This guy has proven that he is not a reliable owner in this league, and this is a league that relies on strong, stable ownership, and this is not someone that I particularly would want to be in bed with if I was MLS. And look, I've never been in the position that Austin soccer fans have been in. I've been in Columbus fans. I've talked about this many times, that I've lost a team, has moved to another city, and I have not given a penny to that league since they left, and won't until they go back. And I don't even know if I would follow them back. Maybe if it was the same team, same name and all that, I probably would, because I'm a weak man that way. But
yeah.
But I've never been in the opposite position. I don't know how I would react, but I would hope I wouldn't. Like, I don't think I'd react well. I don't think I would accept a team that was moving to another city, because you're stealing it from them. You're thieves, and I have no respect for that. Like, earn your own team. Go support your USL team.
Pay your own expansion fee.
Yeah, rally people to buy an expansion team, whatever. Like, fight for pro rel for all I care. But to take a team and then embrace it, I can't. How? That's completely is the opposite of how sports works in my mind, Kevin.
How can Austin sleep at night? That's the question. All right, enough about Precourt, but I just thought it was interesting, this FC Dallas Columbus Crew game with the Austin FC supporters group. Well, in my mind, it's like 10 people. We'll see how many people show up to the game. First game this weekend, tomorrow, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, Colorado versus Atlanta. This is interesting. Can Atlanta get a victory on the road to maybe get back to the Supporters Shield or top of the Eastern Conference conversation? they're facing Colorado, so there's a high probability of this.
Yeah, I mean, the Rapids are I think they're the second worst or the worst team in the league. So obviously, Atlanta's very good. And if I have to pick an MLS Cup favorite at this point, I'm going to pick Atlanta. I think that team is built in such a way that they can be very successful in the playoffs. I know last season, as a TFC observer, that I was quite relieved when Atlanta went out to Columbus in that knockout game. I don't think you have to lose before you win, right? So I think this is the best team. The Red Bulls. How many years do you have to go? The Red Bulls are the only reason I'm going to think the Red Bulls should be favored is because the Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup. And eventually, the most snake-bitten teams eventually win. So maybe this is your year, but I tend to lean towards Atlanta. I guess the one caveat I'll give to that is that they have played recently, but not much of a game to start.
The second game this weekend, Philadelphia versus Montreal in Chester, in Philly. And this is important for the standings. Right now, both teams are separated by 4 points in the Eastern Conference standings. Philadelphia is 5th with 40 points, and Montreal is 6th with 36. If Montreal wins on the road, which only happened twice this year so far, they would cut down that deficit to 1 and might be looking ahead instead of looking backwards. If Montreal loses on the road again, well, depending on the DC United game, DC United will be close to Montreal and can actually overtake them if they win at home on Sunday. So it's a very important game for Philly, for Montreal, and even for DC, depending on who wins this game for the Eastern Conference playoff race.
I would go so far as to say that this is, the quote unquote must win for the Impact. I think that if the Impact lose this game, then certainly the only position you're looking at is 6th. If they win this game, then I think you can start to dream about even catching Philadelphia, even Columbus if you get really hot. But I do think that if they lose this game, it's going to be tough, particularly if DC does get a victory this weekend. So I do think that this is ultimately maybe the Impact's most important game of the season thus far. And I mean, Philly's a weird team. I don't know what to think of Philly right now, Kevin. Their position is their position, but to me, that's exactly what they are, that they are achieving exactly the level that they can achieve, and they're not capable of achieving much higher. So I refuse to really ever view any game with the Philadelphia Union as impossible to win. But certainly they have, achieved basically a 500 record this year. So, here we go. And they're better at home than they are on the road, like any team in MLS. So, but I do think this is a game that the Impact really need to win if they are to be considered a contender. But as we've said many times this year, the Impact are about a year ahead of schedule. So it's all gravy, really. So we'll see what happens.
Toronto FC, LA Galaxy, Zlatan's first and probably only trip ever to Toronto. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This is the last gasp for Toronto. They win, there is still a mathematical chance. They lose, there might be a mathematical chance, but they would be done.
Well, there will be a mathematical chance even if they lose, but it's not much of a mathematical chance. 48 points is now the maximum that TFC can get. They could finish as good as 14-14-6 on the season, and that might just squeak them in if they were to do that. So I think most people in Toronto, including the players, believe and understand that they need to win 7 straight games to win. And while they do that, doesn't seem likely, now does it? And I'm not here to argue that they will. This is a must-win for both of these teams in terms of their playoff potential. LA is obviously a little better off than TFC at this particular time. But, with the coaching change and all that, it's an interesting game. If you're a gambler, by the way, LA is a 4.4 underdog in that game. So they get a 4.4 multiplier if you bet on them. And honestly, having watched TFC at home all year, you might want to do that. 4-1 odds. Why not?
Yeah.
It
makes sense. LA Galaxy are 8th right now in the Western Conference with 38 points, 2 points behind Vancouver in 7th, and 3 points behind the Sounders at the last playoff position at 6th. Moving on in the Eastern Conference and Western Conference, FC Dallas, Columbus traveling to Dallas. You know what? Go Dallas. I really am cheering for Dallas only so that Austin fans traveling to this game can see their future team lose, because that's what you're going to get next year. Karma is, you know what.
I don't know what you'd want if you're a Columbus fan. Do you want to go out strong? Like, would you want, like, I mean, I almost want to see, Columbus host the MLS Cup. If Columbus hosts the MLS Cup final, I am going to Columbus. I want to be there for that circus. But, I don't know what you'd want. Like, do you want them to be successful? Because if this is the end, do you want to go out on a high note, or do you just want to see this team crash and burn because you hate the owner? Like, I don't know what you'd want out of this. But it's a big game, though. Aside that, put the drama aside, and both these teams are Columbus really kind of has been falling backwards, and they sort of need points to solidify that playoff position, because I do think that they can be reined in, particularly from Philly, if they keep getting wins. They're only 3 back or something like that. So it's a huge win there. But and Dallas, I think, has been they had a great start to the season. I'm not sure they've been quite as good since, but certainly a big game all around for both of these teams. But again, oh God, what do we say if you go back to our archives and ignore that I picked Toronto to win the treble again, because that ain't going to happen. But certainly I think they have mathematically been eliminated from one of those. But ignore that and listen to what we said about Columbus and what I said about Orlando, who might still yet win that wooden spoon. And I'm so gonna post that if they do. But listen to what we said, and we said
save this tweet.
I said Columbus was good, but the distractions might get them, or they might dissolve the team halfway through. And they seem to be. I don't know if it's that simple, but they seem to be going in the direction that I thought that they might. And I do think that this looming, you can imagine if you're making league minimum 50,000, you'd have to be thinking to yourself, like, what the hell's going to happen next year? Do I have to move to fucking Texas? Like, it's got to distract these players, and I think it is impacting what they've been doing in the last little while.
Moving on to the next game, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Houston Dynamo versus Portland in Houston. This is an interesting game for Portland. Portland wants to solidify their position in the Western Conference standings. Right now, they're 5th on 44 points. Only 2 goal differential. Actually, no, they're behind Real Salt Lake because of wins. They have 12 wins. Real Salt Lake has 13 wins. Both teams are on 44 points. For Portland, they're only 2 points away from the 3rd spot and 4 points away from a bye in the first playoff round, which is the Sporting Kansas City spot at 48. And you have the FC Dallas spot at 49. So there's still mathematically possibilities for them to climb up the standings. But if they falter, they can go down too. They're only 3 points in front of the Sounders. And Vancouver at the 7th spot are only 4 points behind. So it's not all decided yet in the Western Conference. And if you're Portland, you need a win.
No, for sure, and you would expect a win here. Remember when Houston started well? No, neither do I. But it's not exactly a difficult proposition in front of them here. And Portland is a team that some people were picking to win MLS Cup at the start of the year that have kind of not really been firing on all cylinders all year. But right now they kind of seem to be trending in the right direction. So an interesting matchup there for the Timbers. I'm not too sure what to make of that. Can they continue the Vancouver nightmare of having another rival win an MLS Cup this year? Maybe. I wouldn't bet against them in the playoff. The West is so wide open. Like I have no clue how to handicap the West playoff race right now. Basically, flip a coin, and any of the 6 teams that do find their way in could ultimately and find themselves in MLS Cup final. Now, can they beat one of the top 3 teams that most people think could come out of the East? Well, not over a long period, but in a 1-game series, why not? I like myself. If I'm to Portland right now, I like myself if I'm any team that seems solid in the West playoffs, because I think I can win the West. And, well, we saw it in 2016. You just have to get to MLS Cup final. It doesn't matter where it is. It doesn't matter what the matchup is. You get the right bounce on the right day, and, hey, you're in confetti.
RSL at home versus Minnesota. And, it's the trend now to make some funny social media posts to highlight the game. And this is literally a video game that you might remember. Duck Hunt? Remember Duck Hunt from the mid-'80s on the old NES? Well, the RSL made a little funny video called Loon Hunt, and you see the graphics of the lion jumping away because he's scared. It's a dog, usually in the original video. This one was a lion. and then you just shoot loons, which is kind of sad because loons are nice little animals. RSL, I know, 44 points and 4th position. Minnesota is 9th with 29 points. A playoff spot at this moment looks very unlikely for Minnesota, and to go to the Riot, to Rio Tinto Stadium in Salt Lake, is never easy. I do fancy RSL to get a win here.
Yeah, with this in the NES, I actually remember it on ColecoVision. Do you remember ColecoVision? Does anyone remember ColecoVision, or am I the only one? It had like a controller. That had like 4 finger holes. You held it like a glove, and your pinky would be a control, the ring finger control, so on and so forth. Yeah, the ColecoVision. So yeah, no, I mean in terms of this game, Kevin, RSL was my dark horse pick at the start of the year, and they're starting to sort of roll a little bit into this. They got to win this one. Minnesota is not a good team, as we saw midweek. They're played midweek. It's not a must win in terms of any playoff race, but it's you damn well should win a game for RSL.
And again, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific in Vancouver at BC Place, a Cascadia rivalry match, Vancouver versus Seattle. And this has a lot of playoff implications right now. Seattle is 6th with 41 points. Vancouver is 7th with 40 points. The winner of this game takes over 6th spot. So this is an important game for both clubs. We'll see which Vancouver shows up.
Well, the two teams combined are undefeated in 10. Seattle's form chart is WWWWW, so they're going in the right direction right now, and hell, wouldn't bet against them to make it back to another MLS Cup final, would you? The Caps have been playing better. We've sort of said all the way up, all the way down all year when it comes to the Caps, so we got to give them credit when they've been playing well, and they have been playing pretty well right now. There's, of course, a Cascadia Cup contest as well, but yeah, this is probably, if you look overall in terms of your Saturday games, this is your best matchup of Saturday. This is, if you have one game to watch all weekend, then maybe I might pick this one because it is a rivalry game, although it's the baby partner of the rivalry in there, but nonetheless, it is a Cascadia game. Should be a fun one. Looking forward to seeing that one at 10 o'clock on Saturday. But before we go on to the next game, Kevin, I do need to get an answer. Do you know what ColecoVision is?
Yeah, I heard about it. Never seen it, but I've heard about it. I remember the Atari. My neighbor had an Atari when I was a kid.
So you're saying I'm old is what we're saying here.
I never said that. It's just what you feel, which is different.
All right. I'm going to tweet out later a vision of ColecoVision. You can follow me and find that. So follow me on at 24th Minute if you want to know what ColecoVision was. I have an Intellivision in my property right now. If anyone knows what that is, they're really old. But
Commodore 64, I know what that is.
Oh, C64. I had that. Summer Games was the best game on the C64.
It was the best game in NES too. Track and field. I had the mat where you can run on the mat, And
no, fun stuff. Vintage video games. We should start another podcast. Actually, no, Kevin, we should not start another podcast.
No, we have enough. Unless Patreon goes way up and people are like, we want to hear that vintage video game, then I'll do it. But patreon.com/sportspodcast network. LAFC versus New England. If you're Montreal, you're cheering for LAFC at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. New England is still in the playoff race right now in the Eastern Conference. There's 8 at 33 points, 1 point behind DC United at 7th, 3 points behind Montreal. With a loss and combined with a Montreal Impact win, DC would find themselves in a hole, and not DC, New England. But if New England beats LA on the road, which is not necessarily easy for New England, they're back in the conversation. If they lose, New England's in a hole. So this game is a must-win for New England, and even for LAFC, nothing is assured for LAFC to have 46 points, which is only 5 points different from Seattle. So a few bad results before the end of the season, and LAFC could drop out of the playoffs. With a win, LAFC is on the conversation for top of the Western Conference. So this is an important game for both clubs.
What's their record after Mark Anthony Kaye went down in injury? It's kind of remarkable. I don't know whether to be happy for Mark Anthony Kaye or sad for LAFC, but it seems to be he was a more important part to them than people thought. So anyway, that's interesting. No, The Revs, yeah. Right now we're in the part of the season. I mean, this is always a false flag in many ways because every game is important. As you know, if you go back in our archives and listen to me talk about TFC throwing points away back in March, and you'll know that every damn game is important. Could you imagine if TFC had played its full lineup and got, say, 4 points of those 6? Would they not still be in the playoff race? Really? Right?
Kind of.
So yeah, that was. Yeah, well, they wouldn't be in the playoffs, but if they had 4 of 6, if they had 6 of 6, they'd absolutely be in the playoff race because they'd be 3 points back in Montreal with the game in hand. But nonetheless, they threw those away. So, you know, it is a false flag to say that these games are more important now, but they do seem more important because if you're the Rebs and you lose this game, that's going to be disheartening, and you would have to think that you're just trying to hold the best position you want. The Rebs are – we talked yesterday in our EPL discussion about teams that are kind of in the Netherlands that don't really – Neverlands is what I meant to say, not the Netherlands like Holland. The
Netherlands are floundering too, so I guess it kind of works right now, that comparison.
Yeah, exactly. But what are the Rebs? Like, they're not the worst team in the league, but they're just the Rebs. You know, we often talk about how if you're like listing out the teams in your head that in the leagues, you're probably the two that you usually forget are San Jose and Colorado. I might put the Rebs in there kind of nowadays. The only reason you don't forget them necessarily is that they're in the East and they're in Boston, kind of. Well, they're not really in Boston. They're in Foxborough, aren't they?
Yeah, they're in Foxborough.
Yeah, so they're just a forgettable team in many, many ways. Like, who's the Rebs? Like, who's the Taylor Twellman back in the day? That's still, when I think of the New England Revolution, that's the first person I think, and he's been retired for a decade now.
Teal Bunbury. That's what I think when I look at the Rebs.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
San Jose versus Kansas City. The last game Saturday evening at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Second best team in the Western Conference, SKC, visiting San Jose, the worst team in the Western Conference. If you're Kansas City, you need to win this because you want to have top spot in the Western Conference. Probably. First and second spot will give you a bye for the playoff first round, the play-in game. So if you're Kansas City, you fancy your chances. But San Jose wants to finish this season with a bit of honor, or at least with respect to their fans. And we all expect a lot of changes in San Jose in the offseason. And they want Wando to get a few goals. Who knows if Wando will be back? And Wando's, 3 goals away from Landon Donovan's all-time record? So give the ball to Wando.
Yeah, pretty much. That's all San Jose is playing for right now. 4-15-8. That is... It's not the worst MLS season I've ever seen, but it's among them. I mean, that DC United, when they had 13 points, when was that, 2013? That was pretty bad. But this is pretty uninspiring, this team here. And at least with DC United, when they got the 13 points, they somehow won the U.S. Open Cup that year. So they had something going on, which is hilarious. That two of the CCL teams that in 2013 were DC United, who won the U.S. Open Cup, and Toronto FC, which was terrible, their worst team maybe ever, that they won the Voyageurs Cup. So that was kind of hilarious in terms of the representation that year. But nonetheless, not much to play for San Jose. It's a lot to play for SKC, who they started so well, and they've kind of cooled off since then. But still a team that has to think that they have a chance to be in there at the end, in December as well.
And 2 games on Sunday. 2 games one game that is important for the playoff race in the Eastern Conference. If you are a Montreal Impact fan, once again, you will be cheering for the New York Red Bulls versus DC United at Audi Field in DC. DC United, with a win, can overtake Montreal if Montreal loses. With a loss combined with a Montreal Impact win, they'll find the gap back to 5 points between the two, with DC United having 1 game in hand left. If you're Red Bulls, you need to recover from the big loss against Montreal 2 weeks ago, and you need to battle and to continue to maintain your position on top of the Eastern Conference. You're 55 points. You're leading the Supporters' Shield race right now, only 1 point in front of Atlanta, and Atlanta has a game in hand versus New York. If you're New York, the I-93 rivalry, I believe, with DC, can New York get the job done at Audi Field? DC United played midweek. DC United played a lot of games over the last week, 2 weeks actually, and they will continue to play a lot of games until the end of the season. If you're New York, you have to fancy your chances on the road here.
Yeah, this is the key game for DC United. If they can get a win against the Red Bulls, the Supporter Shield winning Red Bulls at the moment, then absolutely you're looking at this team as having a possibility of closing that gap and getting into the playoffs. And if DC United gets in the playoffs, then I'm not betting against them. They seem to be rolling in the right direction, but they dug themselves such a big hole, and it's still going to be difficult for them to rein it in. As you say, you nailed the issue that they have. They keep having to play game because they have had so many games in hand. They've almost played them all. Still one more in hand than most of the teams that they're chasing. But this is the issue. You played midweek, and then you have to turn around and play the current best team in the league on the weekend rivalry game as well. Obviously, I think that this is there's a lot of games this weekend that I will point to and say these are massive key games for the playoff races, and this one is right up there with it. The Red Bulls are sneaky good this year, and I sort of joked about it a minute ago, but they are sneaky good, and this is a team that has been built for to sustain success. They have a lot of depth in that program, and we talked last year, to the point of cliche about TFC, quote unquote, being the deepest team in MLS history. In many ways, the Red Bulls could probably just quietly argue that, and it's showing this year. They are able to turn around. They showed it this year in the CCL. They showed it this year throughout this season. They don't have the top end big players that you look at and go, wow, but they just have the ability to churn players out year after year after year, and that's because they're fully utilizing their academy system. They're fully utilizing all the systems they are. The Red Bulls famously have never won the MLS Cup as a 96er, but hell, this is still a program that has been very successful for about a decade, and eventually, if you're successful for a long period of time, they will slay that dragon eventually.
And the last game this weekend, Duane, and this one is a missable one, is Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Chicago versus Orlando. Orlando is going to host the MLS All-Star Game in 2019. But until then, you can pretty much skip anything concerning Orlando because they're not that good. Not that good at all. And neither is Chicago.
Hoy boy. If you're going to skip one game, this
Skip
is the
that
game
one.
to skip. Yeah. This has got a 0-0 draw written all over it in many ways. Someone's got to get points in that one. That's what I'll say about it. But I don't know if I'm going to be in front of the computer at 5 o'clock on Sunday. I'll probably be doing something else.
Look, the goal differential for Orlando in 10th spot is minus 22, and Chicago, 11th spot in the Eastern Conference, minus 15. Remember a few weeks ago when we thought, when both those teams were still in contention and Toronto was bottom of that Eastern Conference? Yeah, it's over for both. Minus 22 goal differential for Orlando. That's terrible. And minus 15, that's terrible as well for Chicago. 24 points for both of those teams. It's the Eastern Conference wooden spoon matchup. The loser of this game will finish bottom of the East and get a good draft pick.
Well, for whatever that means. But yeah, two very, well, you know what? These are two systems, two programs. We just talked about how the Red Bulls are, even though they haven't won a championship, you got a lot to respect with that. These are two programs that just are floundering, that they're just spinning their wheels. Chicago had that brief little flare last year where we thought maybe they'd turned around, but that turned out to be a complete outlier, right? You got to feel bad. Both of these cities have the capability of being so much more than they are, too. It's just kind of sad when you look back and look at it. But yeah, I can't. Other than unless you're the type of person that slows down and holds everyone up when you're passing a car wreck, I can't think of any reason to watch this game unless you're that type of person.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And as always, we'll come back Monday to give us our thought on the Canadian Review and the MLS Weekend Review. We'll talk about the playoff implications after this weekend. There's going to be a bit of a change in the standings, probably with the results of this weekend. So we'll talk about it Monday. And until then, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee. And until Monday, as always, as is now the tradition, I wish you a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.